Light Pacific number 152, built by the Rogers Locomotive Works in 1905, began its first full season of operation for the Kentucky Railway Museum in early spring of 1986. The schedule first called for several round trips between Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, via the old Lexington and Ohio Railroad, the first railroad built west of the Alleghenies. This first portion of the program was recorded during the trip on May 10th. The Lexington and Ohio Railroad was completed between the cities of Lexington and Frankfort, Kentucky in 1834, and then in 1849 was sold to the newly organized Lexington and Frankfort Railroad. A rail line between Louisville and Frankfort was finished in 1851, but through passengers from Louisville to Lexington had to change cars in Frankfort because of the difference in ownership of the two lines. In 1869, those two lines merged into one and became known as the Louisville, Cincinnati, and Lexington Railroad. Cincinnati was included in the name because a branch line connecting LaGrange and Covington, Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati, was completed in 1869. The LC&L became part of the L&N in 1881 and is now the Lexington subdivision of the Corbin Division. On May 18th, the weather forecast was calling for a chance of rain. With another Louisville to Lexington excursion scheduled for that day, it was decided to add the museum's X-Monon BL-2 to the 152's consist, just in case the lightweight 462 needed some extra power on a wet and slippery track. Leaving Frankfort, the line climbs the approximately 1% grade up Jet Hill. The weather forecasters were right this day, and it began to rain as the 152 left Frankfort. As you can tell, the going on the hill was a little slippery, but with the diesel's help, the train made it over the top without too much trouble. Passengers on the original Lexington and Ohio had to ride an inclined plane down this hill. 14 years had passed before rail was laid down the hill and into Frankfort.
The principal passenger locomotive for the L&N Railroad in the 1900s, turn of the century, was their 10-wheeler. As trains got heavier, they decided that they needed something better, so the Pacific, being the new wheel arrangement coming into vogue then, was selected, and they asked the Rogers Locomotive Works in Paterson, New Jersey, to build them 5 prototypes of this particular wheel arrangement, and they did in 1905. And sent them to the L&N Railroad, which they used for a number of years, were so well satisfied with it that they decided to build 50 or 60 others and bought the building rights and built the rest of the locomotives in their South Louisville shop.
As part of the pre-Kentucky Derby festivities, a round trip was run on April 30th between the museum grounds in Anchorage and downtown Louisville, a distance of about 12 miles. This excursion carried passengers to the great steamboat race between the Belle of Louisville and the Delta Queen. The opening shot in this program shows the train at L&N's Frankfort Avenue grade crossing on its way back to the museum, while here you're seeing the 152 on its way downtown as it steams through the Linden neighborhood in East Louisville. In the early 1850s, when it was decided to route the L&N main line some miles to the west of Bardstown, Kentucky, the citizens of that community voted $300,000 in bond money to build a railroad connecting their town with the main line at a point several miles south of Shepherdsville. This line, the Bardstown and Louisville Railroad, was completed in March of 1860. The L&N operated the branch for 4 years and then purchased it outright in 1864. The line was extended some 20 miles eastward from Bardstown to Springfield, Kentucky in 1888, but this extension was abandoned in 1984. A lot of the business on this branch comes from distilleries. Claremont, the boarding point, is home to the J.B. Beam Distillery, and here at Lotus are storage warehouses used by several distilleries. The excursions included in this portion of the program ran from Claremont to Bardstown. The 152 pulled the excursion eastward to Bardstown, but since there's no Y there, the museum's BL2 number 32, bringing up the rear of the train, provided the motive power for the ride back to Claremont. While running 3 trips on Saturday, the 152's crew found that the Bardstown line wasn't quite as level as originally thought, and engineer Carl Kruger was having to work the engine a lot more than anticipated. Sunday morning found the 152 dangerously low on coal, with none available along the branch. Since there were also 3 Sunday trips scheduled, it was decided to have the BL2 moved up behind the 152 to give her a helping hand. This worked out quite well power-wise, helping to conserve the coal supply. But the train certainly had a new and different sound to it. Timetables from the 1890s show 4 passenger trains scheduled daily on this branch, 2 movements each way between Louisville and Springfield. With highway improvements in the 1920s came a decline in passenger traffic, and that service was discontinued in the early 1930s. Freight service remained, however, and the occasional passenger wanting to ride the line could still get a seat on a combination coach baggage car. This mixed train service was discontinued in 1953. The L&N began construction of its main line from Louisville to Nashville in 1853. This construction included a branch to Lebanon, Kentucky, as residents of that Marion County town had put up $200,000 in bond money for that purpose. The branch left the main line at Lebanon Junction and continued eastward through New Haven to Lebanon. This line saw its first through passenger train in 1858, and later the line was extended toward eastern Kentucky, where it now connects at Sinks with the Cincinnati to Atlanta main line. The 152's trips on this line were similar to those on the Bardstown Branch. The 152 pulled the train from Lebanon to New Haven, and the BL2 headed it up on the return trip.